One, we are live. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Disney Antiquities and Collectibles. It is Sunday, June. We didn't have a podcast last week, but we are back along with my amazing co-host, Matt McKim. Matty, how you doing today, my friend?
Okay. Hey, we've got a great show for you today. I think you guys are going to like this. It's a little different, but definitely Disney through and through.
Yeah. You know what's funny is I've had conversations with David, and he's shown me, like, every time we talk, he'll show me these pictures of what he has in his collection, and he can't see me, but I'm on the other end of the line going like this, because he has things I've literally never seen, never heard of.
Yes.
His collection is astounding.
Absolutely.
So I'm really, really excited.
It's a time frame within Disney's history that not a lot of people have either seen or even heard about, especially a younger generation. So this is exciting.
And I hope we can bring that. I hope the younger generation looks and goes, okay, it's more than Disneyland, because I think people see it more as Disneyland instead of a history of Disney,
Absolutely.
So, but anyways, well, without further ado, let's bring on the incredible Disney historian and author, Mr. David Lesjak. David, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hello. I'm doing great, sir? Thank you. How about you guys?
Doing all right.
When, as a child, you were born and raised in Vancouver, right? Am I correct with that? Vancouver?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
What got you started? What made you, everybody's got different stories about what got you started in Disney and the historical aspect of it?
Sure. So my friends used to run an antique and collectible shop on Main Street in Vancouver. And I used to hang out with them every Sunday. We would go to garage sales and flea markets, and, they're looking for inventory for their stores. So I came across some early Walt Disney's Comics and Stories comic books from the 1940s. And I thought, well, these are really cool. So I started collecting those, and then I sort of tired of them after a while, because you read the comic book, you put it in a Mylar sleeve, you hide it in your closet so it's not subjected to sunlight, and then you might look at it once every year or something like that. So I ended up selling off all of those, and then I started, because I was a prepubescent teen, I started collecting Marilyn Monroe memorabilia. And it turned out there wasn't very much you could collect. There was magazine articles, there was the Playboy calendar, there wasn't very much. So I thought, well, this is pretty silly. So I was out with them at a flea market. One of our larger department stores had a big garage sale type flea market in their parking lot every Sunday. And I came across a pinback button for the 1955 Mickey Mouse Club TV show. And it was from a local studio, KVOS TV 12, down in Bellingham, Washington. And I thought, well, this is a really neat item. So I picked it up for $5, and then it just went from there. I thought, well, I'm gonna collect Disney stuff. And then I collected everything. Every time we went to a swap meeting, I collected everything, every genre, every era. And I sort of thought, well, this is getting a little out of control. I need to focus. And then I was at my library one day, and I came across Cecil Muncie's book, Disneyana, which I think was published in 1978, 72, 78, somewhere in there. And that really opened up my eyes to the world of 1930s Disney and Disney World War II. And I thought, this is what I'm going to collect. I'd always had an interest in World War II history. My next door neighbor regaled me with war stories. He served in a Canadian artillery regiment during World War II. And so I thought, well, I've always been a student of World War II because of him. And I thought, there's a whole chapter in Muncie's book about Disney's involvement in the war. So I thought, okay, I'm going to collect the World War II stuff, and I'm going to collect the 1930s Mickey Mouse stuff. And that was, I've been collecting since about 1981, and I've been writing about Disney history since about 1987. So,
wow.
Yeah, I think I have about 300 to 350 Mickey Mouse items from the 1930s. I have an equal number of Disney World War II related items that are equally split between the home front and the combat insignia that the studio designed during the war. I have a reference library that's got over 8,000 magazine, newspaper, and journal articles, predominantly pre-1945. I have over 50 original press photos from the 30s and 40s of Walt Disney. Diane Disney Miller gave me a copy of her dad's interview with Pete Martin for the Saturday Evening Post. So I've got 22 hours of audio material of Walt Disney.
Wow.
I've got a lot of really rare items in my World War II collection. My World War II collection is one of the top collections in the world. I think I'm in the top 3 or 4 for that genre. You know, I loaned out 48 items from my World War II collection for Gallery 6 at the Walt Disney Family Museum.
Right.
My friend Jeff Purdy was one of 3 creative directors for the museum, along with Bruce Gordon and Paula Sigmund Lowry, formerly of the Disney Archives. And Bruce Gordon was a former Disney Imagineer. And Jeff introduced Diane to my name, and then Diane contacted me and said, would you like to fly down to the museum? We'll give you a tour, show you what we're all about, see if you want to join our team. And I thought to myself, I don't have to go down to the museum. I'll just say yes right now. But I went down, and you know, the coolest thing about that, I sorely miss Diane. She was just so wonderful to me. She really took me in, and I had a great relationship with Diane. But it was really neat because the museum at the Presidio was still under construction at the time. So Ron's walking around, Ron Miller, her husband, is walking around with this big set of blueprints, and we're walking, you know, all through the construction zone, up and down ladders and temporary staircases. And we come around the corner in this one area, and Ron says to me, he puts the blueprints down and gives me a pat on the back and says, and David, this is your section of the museum. And what it was Gallery 6, which looks at the war years. And I ended up lending them 48 items from my own collection for that gallery, facsimiles of which are still on display right now.
Yeah, that's great.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
What an opportunity, though, to not just have them in a museum, just any old museum, but a museum that really is all about the man and the things he touched. You know what I mean? Very a personal thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny, you know. On my first visit down, they had the temporary museum, the original museum on Gorgas Avenue in the wooden building there. And I'm standing in front of these 2 massive display cases that have not even all of her father's Academy Awards, because he won about 31 or 32 personal awards himself. But there's these 2 big display cases, and there's the special Snow White Oscar. And then there were the original ones. They gave out plaques before they gave out the statues for the cartoons. They were little plaques. And they had a bas relief of the Oscar on the front of it. And so I'm looking at all of them, and I said to her, oh, there's the one for Der Fuhrer's Face, the Donald Duck propaganda cartoon from World War II. So we start talking about that, and then she said, you know, you really know so much about my father. I think I want to adopt you. And I said to her, I said, as soon as I get home, I'll put the paperwork in the mail. and she just laughed. But there was another time that I argued with her about the money that she was paying me, because she was paying me a considerable amount to help her. And we were looking at a different part of the museum for a display that I lent some other things out for my collection. And she said, David, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate what you do for me. And I said, are you kidding me, Diane? I said, thank you. But you know what, me being able to work for you, if I had imagined this, you know, back in the 1980s, if someone had said that to me, I would have said that they were crazy. I said, but you really do pay me too much money. I said, I'd be happy making $20 an hour. I said, this is a hobby for me. You know, and she looked at me, and I'm 6 feet tall, and she was 5 foot nothing. She put her left arm around me, and she looked up at me, and she said, David, just shut up and take my money. And I just started laughing. But she was you know what? She was just the most wonderful person to work with. She had a great cynical sense of humor. She had a memory that was sharp as the proverbial tack. You know, I've got over 1,800 emails from her. We used to go back and forth all the time, and she had great stories to tell. She had perfect recall. She was telling me things when she was 5 years old, when her dad was working on Snow White in 1938. Wow. There were things that she could remember about what her father was doing at that time. And she was just a great benefactor, you know. Besides the money that she paid me for stuff, you know, I would just send her stuff out of the blue. When I wrote my Red Cross book, I found 60 letters that had been exchanged between her father and the matriarch of the Red Cross canteen that he had served at Neufchâteau, France. And so they were at the University of Lincoln in Nebraska, because the lady that ran the canteen was a dramatics teacher at the university. And so in 1931, I guess when it dawned on her who Walt Disney was, and that she had worked, you know, that he had worked at the canteen that she operated, they started corresponding. And they exchanged 60 letters until her passing in 1943. So I got copies of all those letters to include in my book. And then I thought, oh, Diane might like to look at these. And I transcribed them. I made photocopies of all of them. I sent them to her, and I got a one-word response back, got them. And I was sort of like, oh, I was sort of disappointed because I was hoping that she would share some of her thoughts and feelings about reading those letters. Well, about a month later, I got a beautiful handwritten letter from her, just saying, I've never seen these before. Great information I'd never seen before. It puts a different light on my father's experiences in France. And then she included a check, a rather substantial check. And I said, why are you paying me for that? I just want to share this information with you. And she goes, no, you deserve to be remunerated for what you're doing. And that I never asked for the money, but she, out of the kindness of her heart, she just sent it to me. And the other thing she did, I'm married with 3 kids. She paid for 2 family trips to Disneyland for me and my family.
Nice.
And when you go as a guest of the Disney family, that changes everything. You don't wait in line for any of the attractions. And, we got into 1901 and California Adventure and, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I miss her dearly. She had lots of really great projects that she had wanted to do. And that I was supposed to be part of. And, unfortunately, when she passed away, some things changed at the museum and none of those things came to fruition, unfortunately. But I cherish the time that I had with her and the memories and the information that she shared with me and the friendship that we had. She was just a great person.
Oh, she really was. And very down to earth.
Yes. You know what always surprised me? Yeah, you know what always surprised me? When I went down, she had me down to the museum about 5 or 6 times. And one time I went down and actually gave a sold-out guest lecture on the history of her father's Hyperion studio. But what always amazed me is we would always start the day meeting at the museum, in the lobby of the museum, and then we would just go from there. And what was really cool, no matter how many times I got there way ahead of our scheduled appointed time, she was always there before me, always. I could never beat her to the museum. And what was really neat was she would stand in the lobby and she would engage with guests. And she would talk to them for as long as they wanted to talk to her. I think she was just really thankful that these people that were coming to visit the museum had an appreciation and an interest of what her father had accomplished and the mission of the museum, which was, to promote the arts. And she would just spend as much time as people wanted to talk with her. She would write an autograph. She would have her picture taken. She never shooed anybody away. She was extremely approachable. And that's just who she was. She was just a really down-to-earth, approachable person. She wasn't pretentious. She wasn't, some people with money, they're rude and obnoxious. And you know how some people can be. She was not like that at all. Not like
Absolutely
that.
Not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
So,
her parents raised her well.
Yes, they did. Yeah, at her and
has the Disney Family Museum, have they reached out at all? With everything you have, with all the knowledge, with that seems rather different that nobody's reached out and said, hey, we'd like you to really be a part of this.
No, and I don't know what happened when she passed away, because a lot of the historians and researchers and writers that they sort of had on staff were pretty much let go. J.B. Kaufman used to be part of the staff, and Jim Corcus contributed, and who's the other one? David Gerstein. I think we were all contributing, and I don't think any of us basically heard from the museum after she got. She told me, because of all the World War II stuff I shared with her, she actually wanted me to curate the special World War II exhibit that they had there, and the museum didn't even approach me. Approach me about it. And when I contacted them, I need to be careful what I say, because I don't want to come off as sour grapes or anything like that. But when I approached them and said, hey, if you want me to come down, and Diane wanted me to participate, she talked about doing a special guest panel series, talked about some of the propaganda films, the war films, a guest lecture on the insignia, a guest lecture on all the home front stuff. I've got several hundred, 350 items that are available for loan. I'll loan you anything out of my collection. And I was basically met with crickets, and basically said, we picked somebody to do it. And I'm not disparaging the guy who curated it. He was associated with the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, so they got him to curate the exhibit. And I was locked out. I didn't participate in any way, shape, or form. So it is what it is. It is what it is.
This is just an idea, but if you could ever get the sponsorship or the backing, I think a traveling exhibit would just be incredible with all the pieces that you have. But again, when you have a traveling exhibit, the thing that's scary is all your pieces being
Yeah,
saved,
yeah.
but it with all you have, David, I mean, that would be definitely an idea because you have, and again,
A
I know
lot.
you brought some incredible pieces. Yeah, you brought some incredible pieces to show, but yeah, I definitely think that would be an idea that needs to come to pass,
Well,
Well,
there's something exciting in the potentially that's in the works. I can't say anything about it right now, but there might be something happening down the road here. I don't know. We'll have to see how some things play out, but there's some potentially really exciting things in the pipes. So
good.
we'll
yeah,
see
as
what.
we said about things traveling, you'd want to be careful of security reasons. But maybe if you had a place, a museum in the West, museum in the East, and then in the Midwest,
Yeah,
so you're only taking it to three different places for 3, 6 months or whatever at a time.
exactly,
Yeah,
That would
exactly.
be spectacular.
Yeah,
yeah,
I've got some super rare items. I have some items that I've never seen anywhere else, and I've been collecting
yeah.
for, 40 years or whatever. So, I do have some really, really, really rare items in my collection that I think people would be gobsmacked if they saw.
Well,
Yeah.
that was going to be one of my questions. Is actually, since this is such a small snippet of time that not a lot of people know about, really.
Yeah.
What is your most rare piece that you have?
Ooh.
Well,
Ooh.
I have something here. I'll show. I have about a dozen different items here, and I'll show
Great.
you. I'll show you one of my favorite items. So,
Yeah. I wanted
Oh,
wings.
so
Donald
what's
so,
Duck.
so
so
what's the
this is
backstory?
So the backstory is I was researching the insignia that was done for Stalag Luft 3, which was a German prisoner of war camp that held Allied airmen. And there was an article in the March 1944 Popular Science magazine that showed the original art for that design and a postcard that was sent by a prisoner of war at that camp to his girlfriend in North Carolina, who forwarded it to Walt Disney. And they were asking for patches of the design that was on the postcard. So I'd always thought that the guy that wrote the postcard, Robert Bishop, was the airman that created the original insignia. It
Ah,
took me about 7 years, but I eventually found out the fellow that did it was Emmett Cook Jr. And Emmett Cook was a bombardier on a B-17 bomber that was shot down on a raid on Palermo Harbor in Italy. And out
oh,
of his crew, there were only 4 survivors, including him. He was
wow.
captured by what he called some Italian goat herders with a rusty rifle and a pitchfork, turned over to the Germans, and he ended up at Stalag Luft 3. For people
Wow.
that might not know, Stalag Luft 3 was where the Great Escape took place. There was a famous movie back in the 60s, I think, with Steve McQueen and James Garner and Charles Bronson. It
Yes.
was a little bit of a fictionalized account, but basically what happened was 77 prisoners of war escaped from the camp. 3 made it back to friendly lines. 50 were captured and murdered by the Gestapo, and then the balance were captured and reincarcerated. So this postcard that I have here, this Donald Duck postcard, was written by Emmett Cook, and he sent it to his mother in June of 1943, telling her that he was now a prisoner of war. So his postcard was seen by other guys in the camp, and then other guys in the camp really liked this design, so they started drawing it or having him draw it in their YMCA diaries, and then it just circulated through the camp. Well, I located him. He actually wrote. I contacted him through a prisoner of war bulletin board on a website that I found decades ago. And a friend of his put him in touch with me, and he said, "No, Robert Bishop didn't do the design. I did the very first one." And
Wow.
this was the second. This is the second iteration that he did. The first one he did in his YMCA diary, which the family donated to the Air Force Museum in Colorado. But he gave
Oh,
me this. I didn't
wow.
ask for it. It just showed up on my doorstep one day. It was inside of an Easter card. He sent me a card wishing me a happy Easter, and this postcard was in there. And so I phoned him right away. I said, "Well, this is amazing." I said, "I'll take pictures of it and return it to you right away." And he goes, "No, I want you to have it."
Wow.
And and
That's a
you know, I
special piece.
I became very emotional. I get emotional just thinking about it right now. And I said, "Are you
Yeah.
sure?" I said, "I'm more than happy to return this to you. It's a family heirloom." And he said, basically, no. He said, I know your involvement in researching the studio's history for that time period. And he goes, "I would be honored if you could be the caretaker of it."
Wow.
And so that's one of my absolute favorite items. I've got lots of favorite items, but just because of
Sure.
the personal connection and the
Yeah.
historical connection, it's probably my first or second most favorite items, I would think.
Wow,
So,
that's amazing. And what a story behind it too.
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's really neat. You know, I used to interview World War II veterans. I did a lot of writing for World War II magazine, so I've interviewed over 40 World War II veterans. I wrote cover stories, feature stories, had my own, contributed to a column for a while there, and so I think that was again my interest in World War II history, right? So when I
Wow.
found out that Disney was involved to the extent that they were, and then I started researching it because for whatever reason the company gives scant recognition to their involvement in the war, which I think is a travesty because you know what? Walt Disney was a patriot. He
Yes.
he was red, white, and blue. He was a patriot through and through. And so
Yeah.
not to promote this part of the company's history, I just think is a tragedy. And I think part of it is because one of their biggest current day audiences is Japan. And during World War II, Japan was the enemy, unfortunately,
Yes.
but they were the enemy. And so I think they don't want to offend that big segment of their fan base. And the other thing is they don't like it when pictures are shown of Disney characters holding instruments of war. So they're holding
Yeah.
a bomb, a knife, a machine gun, a pistol,
Right.
you know, whatever it happens to be. They're not too thrilled about that. But I
Right.
always say you have to take things into historical context, and you can always
Yeah.
have a caveat and say, you know what? Yes, this image is stereotypical and it's obviously not acceptable in today's standards. It's a racial stereotype, but you have to put it into the context that that group of people or that person was the enemy at that time. They're not anymore,
Yeah.
but at
Right.
that point in time they were. And I think
Right.
if you
Yeah.
put that sort of a caveat or disclaimer, you know, then I think there's no harm in showing that information. You know,
Yeah.
that's my personal belief anyhow. You know, I've got a really rare poster. Funny story. I was doing a really weird search on eBay. I was just doing some random searches, and I found this poster listed under dealer lots whatever, and the guy didn't have World War II listed
Oh.
in the description. It was just Disney poster 1943, and I was searching under Disney 1943, and I found it. Well, what it was, it's super rare. It was an illustration that was done for the chief forester of the state of California in 1943. My understanding is it was put in the information boards at the trailheads. So you're going to go off on a trail for a hike, this poster greeted you. And what it is, it's a propaganda poster. And there's a little bug driving a cartoon car through the forest. And the little bug is a Japanese stereotype. So he's got Coke bottle glasses and slanted eyes and buck teeth, but he's got little antenna and he's got a little hat with the rising sun on it. And he's driving through the forest. He's flicked a cigarette behind him, and now the forest behind him, it's a conflagration. The forest is just erupted in flames. And the tagline on the poster is, "Don't be a firebug. A careless fire is sabotage."
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a very dramatic poster. And so I put in a bid. I thought, okay, I can't afford much, but I put in my maximum bid, and then I didn't go back to look at it because I didn't want to be disappointed if the price got over my limit. I got an alert from eBay about a week later saying I had won the poster, $49.99.
Wow.
Plus postage. Yeah.
That's great.
I was
And
lucky enough to see this. I've
yeah,
been lucky enough to see this, and it's incredible. It's amazing. Hopefully later you can post a picture of it. But
sure.
yeah, when he told me that story, I was just in shock because
Yeah.
I've never seen one like that. I
And
didn't
it,
know that existed.
and another one has shown up since, and it sold on eBay for about $650, but it was in really poor condition. It had, you know, foxing on it and pinholes and creases and that sort of stuff. Mine has some four pinholes in the corners, and then it's got a little tiny bit of foxing in the margin. Otherwise, it's pristine. And what's funny about that is I'm writing Hank Porter's biography, and the children of Hank Porter sent me an archive of about 500 images that they have of artwork that their father created. And in it was this little teeny tiny 2-inch by 2-inch square image of that poster. And I thought, but it wasn't it didn't have any writing on it. It was just the illustration. And I thought, what the heck was this used for? I've never seen this before. And then, you know, a couple of months later, I'm at the Los Angeles Public Library online database of photos, and there's a picture of Walt Disney holding the artwork, presenting it to the chief forester of California. And then, I'm not kidding you, literally 2 weeks after that, there it is on eBay. You know, and like how serendipitous is that, right? Like I saw the image, I've been pondering for a couple of years where this was used, and then I stumble across the picture, and then 2 weeks later, the actual item is up for sale. So I'm sort of thinking the Disney collector gods were sort of smiling on me at that time frame. But it's a really neat poster, and it's just one of many different home front initiatives that the studio was involved with during the war. It's a spectacular piece. It really is.
Yeah.
Well, when you think about it, I mean, the way that was being displayed, if you were lucky, it was in a locked case, so it didn't get rained on. But the rest of them would have been rained and, you know, sandblasted and everything else.
Yeah.
And because they're out in the elements, so they've got to be rare, unless
and then probably
stack them.
and then probably thrown out, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Probably thrown out.
Thrown in the trash.
Yeah.
So do you want to see a few more? Do you want to see a few more things?
That's what I was going to ask you. You brought plenty to show. I would love to. Yeah.
So.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, I'm not
Dispatch.
getting it quite yet.
Here,
raise a little bit.
Sorry,
it's Donald
David.
Duck. Yeah, there you go. And at the bottom is Donald Duck.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Wow,
so
I
don't normally handle things with my fingers. I usually have archival gloves, so I apologize if anybody is out there watching and freaking out. I normally don't handle the things without my gloves on, just so you know. But what that is, that's a newsletter that was done in 1944 at the studio. There was one issue. There was supposed to be another one, but it wasn't produced. And it's filled with information about what the studio was doing at that time. So there's a section on victory through air power. There's a comment about the propaganda film Education for Death. There's a letter from Walt Disney and Roy Disney. There's a letter from Mickey Mouse. There's a gatefold pinup with artwork that was done by Milt Kahl and Freddie Moore. It folds out about that big. The back of it has insignia created by artist Hank Porter. So there's some of the insignia that Hank created.
Wow. Those are great.
Back cover.
Lots of color.
So it was sent to staff that were serving overseas, and in the introduction letter, Walt said, here's a little publication to let you know what we're up to. It had some information about the films they were doing for the Canadian government. It had a little comic section done by Roy Williams, artist Roy Williams. It's a typical day in the life of Walt Disney, and it shows how hectic his schedule was. So that's a really neat little publication. For some reason, they sell for gigantic money right now. But it is a fairly rare item because it was only sent out to staff. What's really neat on the reverse of the pinup, it lists all of the staff who were serving in the military, what units they were with, and where they could be contacted if you wanted to send them a letter.
That's
which was really neat, which I thought was
I've never
really
heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So that's a pretty cool item. Excuse me there. I've got another piece. So that cover is a takeoff of the Der Fuhrer's Face sheet music. So when they did the cartoon, Spike Jones and his City Slickers did the song. It was an overwhelming success. The record companies couldn't keep up with pressing records to get them out. The radio shows were using it as a bond fundraiser. So, we'll play the song if you pledge to buy a $25 bond, that sort of thing. Like it was huge. So that's sort of the image that's on the cover of the sheet music. Here, I'm going to take it out of the wrapper again. So hang on.
Are your hands clean?
Yeah, I keep rubbing them on my pants here. So this is the exhibitor's manual for Der Fuhrer's Face.
Oh, yeah. I think I might have seen something like that, at least something very similar to it.
Yeah. And then on the reverse, there's the poster.
Oh,
and then there's all the lobby cards that you could get.
Wow.
And then when you open it up, it's all filled with publicity and promotional ideas. There's radio spots, there's newspaper mats, there's ideas for doing promotions in theaters, games, prizes, that sort of thing. Super rare. There's only about 3 known to exist.
Oh, really?
This came my way from a friend of mine in Seattle, Greg Heberling. And he met an older gentleman who was in his 80s who had been friends with a theater owner. The theater owner, every time they played a Disney cartoon, he would give this kid all of the exhibitors' manuals. So there was Dumbo, there was Bambi, there was Snow White, there was, it was a huge stash of stuff. And so they posted a message on one of these collector boards, and people, they're lowballing the guy. Oh, I'll give you $100 or, whatever it is, right? Like people were really, this guy I think was in his 80s. I think they were really trying to take advantage of him. So I said, well, what you need to do, there's a big poster dealer down in Oregon, I think he is. I think you need to talk to him because he does these big poster auctions every year. You'll probably get maximum amount of money there. And so they sent the whole collection to the poster guy, and he got a huge sum of money, like a huge sum of money. And so he had two of these exhibitor manuals, and so as a sign of thanks, they gave me one of them. The guy said, "Oh, I think David should have one of these for helping me out." So
that's nice.
That was sweet.
It pays to be good-hearted. It pays to be good-hearted.
Yeah.
And I wasn't expecting anything. I wasn't expecting anything at all. I just wanted this guy, and I saw this stuff and I go, oh God, there was a victory through air power press manual. Oh God, I would love that. I would love the Dear Fear of Space one, but I can't afford it. They went for huge money. Like I think it was thousands of dollars these things went for. And so for them to give me one, I just thought, wow, that's the coolest thing. I didn't ask for anything. It just showed up, Well,
and they know you're a good caretaker. So
yeah.
It's a good investment on his part.
and you know what's really neat? I've got 3 kids, and so my wife and my oldest daughter, they appreciate the collections for what they are, and they like them, that sort of thing. But my 2 boys are really into it. Like my youngest son, he's really into the 1930s stuff, and he's become quite the pin aficionado now. He knows a lot about Disney pins now, and that's sort of a little genre that he's collecting. I collect Disney pins as well. I mainly collect the older stuff, but I like the pins that have Walt Disney on them. The old style pins with Walt Disney on them. So anyway. But and then my older son, he likes the World War II stuff. He really has an interest in the World War II stuff. So there's a big show coming up down in Linwood, Washington called the Mouse Meet. We usually do a display. This is their 14th year doing it. They have old-time Disney staffers. Bob Gurr's been there. Floyd Norman has been there. Tony Anselmo's been there. Marty Sklar has been there. Like all the big names have come and been guest speakers. But they usually come with me down to, the 2 boys come with me down to the convention. We usually do an exhibit. So one year we did a 1930s Kay Kamen Christmas exhibit. One year a 1930s Mickey Mouse Club exhibit. One year, Hank Porter insignia art. I own about 24 pieces of original Hank Porter artwork. One year was Disney Homefront stuff. So we've done a lot of displays. This year we're going to do a Disney World War II poster exhibit. So that should be fun.
Yeah,
so,
that's great.
So besides the war stuff, I like esoteric stuff. So this is a really neat item.
Benefit. Oh, the polo game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, in Santa Monica. Interesting.
1937.
So this is a 1937 benefit polo game program, Santa Monica Charity League. And what's really neat is there's a Mickey Mouse team that's playing in this tournament, and Walt Disney is listed as a member of the Mickey Mouse team. So I've never seen another one of these ever.
Yeah.
And
1937. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is through my friendship with Dave Smith. So, like I said, I have about 50 original press photos of Walt Disney, but this isn't an original one. But
that's fun. That's one you don't see very often.
Yeah, there's Walt in his polo outfit.
Yeah,
that's great.
Wow.
That's great. Yeah, I always think of the equestrian center near the studio when I think of polo. So it's interesting with the Santa Monica. So actually, he didn't play.
Yes, he did.
Monica. He did play down.
Oh yeah, he did play. Yeah, because that's where this game was held. Yeah, he played there. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, he used to practice at the Dubrock Academy, which I think was in Burbank.
Burbank. Yeah, it was in Burbank. Yeah.
They used to practice there.
Okay.
Yeah.
The equestrian center on Riverside, which is also where the studio is on Riverside. I always think of that. So.
Oh yeah.
I think I need my glasses for this one.
What does it say, David?
Okay, so this is a Mickey Mouse fan card, and it's signed, well, here it is, Art, with best wishes, says Toots Novell. Oh. So, does anybody know who Toots Novell is?
That sounds familiar.
Toots Novell. I was just reading the story about Toots. Oh,
so
Mel. Mel was talking, yeah.
So Toots Novell was, I believe he was a French acrobat that came to the United States, and he took part in vaudeville shows. And in the early 1930s, there was a stage show put on by a company called Marco and Fanchon. And so he played in the stage show dressed up as Mickey Mouse. So you may have seen that famous picture of Walt in front of the Hyperion studio beside the car that had the Mickey Mouse label, and there's a guy standing beside him in the Mickey Mouse costume, or he's sitting on I think the roof of the car in his Mickey Mouse costume with the head off. That was Toots Novell.
Okay.
So this is a really rare fan card to start with, but I have never seen Toots Novell's signature on anything. So I think what happened was he was probably because he used to go on that little Mickey Mouse car to premieres of Mickey Mouse cartoons all over southern Los Angeles the Los Angeles area, Hollywood and that. And they would park the car in front of the theater, and then he would dance around in his costume. And so I think a kid probably came up to him, and he either had the fan cards or the kid had the fan card, and he signed it to him. That's what I think this is from. But again, esoteric, but it's neat. It's neat.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, the history. Yeah, exactly.
Well, the threads of history just kind of weave back and forth.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yeah. So another really cool item, Greta Garbo, right? Greta Garbo's in love with Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse doesn't want anything to do with her. What's really neat is I believe that illustration was done by Joe Grant, who headed up the model department. Yes. Yeah. Because there's a Portuguese magazine that has that caricature on the front cover. That's from like I can't even remember the year it is now, but it's really early. But what's really cool is, and I'll post this in the comments after the podcast, I have a picture of Walt Disney's Hyperion desk when he moved into his third office, the one that has all the oak paneling behind him. And on the desk is a cigarette holder, and the cigarette holder shows Greta Garbo on her knees like that with Mickey Mouse. It's a little, it's a little cigarette holder of that exact illustration. So one of the artists, and I presume it was probably Joe Grant because he was very artistic, made a cigarette holder for Walt that he had on his desk with that illustration as the basis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really cool.
That's seriously cool.
And I've never seen a photograph of the cigarette holder with that image on it. I've not seen that.
Within 10 minutes after the podcast is over, you will.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
You will. Okay. This is, this isn't the most valuable thing in the world, but I really love it. It's
yeah. I love that.
Oh.
I love that.
So who's it written to?
Nobody in particular.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's just Mr. Renee S. Wilson, 2019 West 41st Drive, Los Angeles.
Okay.
So he wrote to the studio about something. I don't know, maybe he applied to be an artist there, and maybe this was the rejection letter or the acceptance letter. I don't know. There was no correspondence that came with it, but I love Hyperion stuff. Yes. I really love Hyperion stuff. And my friend Gustavo, he gave this to me. I think he gave this to me as a present, a Christmas present. So
Gustavo Rodriguez, good guy. Shop in New York. Yeah. Great guy. He's
one of the moderators on my Vintage Disney Collectibles Facebook group. I hope you don't mind if I plug it there.
Yeah. But, no, not at all. Actually, I've got it shared into your group right now. I've got the podcast shared into your group.
Oh,
so I hope you don't mind either.
Oh, thank you. No, this is great. Mutually beneficial. So I have no problem.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the neatest Hyperion related item I ever found. So I've been writing a manuscript for 10 years now on the history of the Hyperion studio. And I have a little research team that helps me. And what we've discovered is we found a cache of all of the building permits that were issued for Hyperion. So we know when the first building permits were issued and what they were for. So my plan for the book is to go year by year for every year that they were there and start with the schematic. So the first year just shows their little tiny building. And then the next year, it shows a little tiny building, but then it shows the add-ons. And then the next year, so we just keep adding on to the schematic. And what we've been able to do as well is identify what departments were in those additional add-ons that they were constructing. And then what I would like to do is, so we're going year by year, I've got all this interview material and magazine articles and stuff like that, where Walt Disney and his artists are talking about the things that they're doing for every year, right? So I want to have them in their own voices tell the story of what was happening in Hyperion year over year over year over year. So instead of me writing about that night that they ran the sound for Steamboat Willie and they were using the noisemakers and they were projecting it on the sheet, and Iwerks came up with a little, turn the telephone into a receiver or whatever, I'm going to have them tell the story of what it was like. So Iwerks and Les Clark and Wilfred Jackson and Roy Disney and Walt Disney, they're going to be talking about that night instead of me. So you start the chapter with a schematic showing what was there, what was being built, and then they talk about what accomplishments they were up to or what experiments they were up to or what they were working on. So personality animation, color, stories versus gags, multiplane camera, all that sort of stuff, music, synchronization. So we'll just go year over year and talk about it. So the neatest thing, so while we were doing the research, I found the guy that bought the property. He bought half the property from the Disney brothers. So the soundstage was sold to a vitamin company. Everything on the west side of the property was sold to Eric Curtis's father, who ran an optical company making bomb sights during World War II. So he had some great stories, because the story where the animators, they would get bored and they would flick the push pins up into the ceiling. Well, he said, I remember going into some of the rooms and there were push pins in the ceilings, and I couldn't figure out why there's all these push pins in the ceiling. But what was really neat was there was a Mickey Mouse coat of arms painted on one of the doors. And it turned out to be, it was Walt Disney's office door. And it was a heraldic coat of arms that had Mickey and Minnie in the different quadrants on this coat of arms. He had it. When they sold the studio, he took out all of the stained glass windows, and somebody cut the door in half and cut out the coat of arms. So he had it. So he offered it for sale. And I'm thinking, yowza, what a great item this would be. It was on Walt Disney's second office door, because he had 3 different offices at Hyperion, and it was on his second office door. And I thought, this is like a phenomenal piece of history. I need to buy this. And it was very affordable. It was very, very, very affordable. But you know what I did? You know what I did? Being the kind-hearted guy that I am, I turned Diane Disney onto it. And I said, Diane, this is a piece of history that you need to have in your museum.
Sure.
And she ended up buying it. She ended up buying it from the guy. Yeah.
Wow.
But and then the stained glass window, the guy told me it went to a business, and he told me the name of the street. And I had one of my friends drive up and down that street and the laneways and all over the place looking for the stained glass windows, because they came out of Walt Disney's office, and he couldn't find them. He said all the new construction, it was all new construction in that area. So Walt Disney stained glass windows are out there somewhere. I don't know where, but they're out there somewhere because they were saved. But, do we have time for another piece of?
Sure.
We have more than enough time, David. Take your time.
Keep going.
Yeah. Yep. Yoo-hoo Gang.
So these are the Christmas cards. Oh, Christmas letter. It's a letterhead.
Yeah. So this is the only one I've ever seen, and it's from 1934. So Penny's department store was a licensee, and they ran back to school sales, and they did Santa Claus promotions, that sort of thing. That was the genius of Kay Kamen, Disney's merchandise licensing rep. He was able to generate literally millions and millions of dollars in revenue for the company off of merchandise, which was an untapped source of income. So he signed a deal with Penny's in 1934 to be sort of like the official sponsor of one of the official sponsors of the Mickey Mouse Club. So this was a letter that was sent out to members of the Mickey Mouse Club. I don't know which location this is from, because it doesn't have that on here. I don't know if it was sent out to every kid in every Penny store or whatever, but I've only seen this one, so I think it had a very limited distribution. But basically, the letter reads, "Dear Mickey Mouse Club member, it's been a real pleasure to be your official Mickey Mouse store for the past 2 years. We've had a lot of fun out of it and are looking forward to another bang-up year together. Santa Claus in person will be in our toy department on the second floor 2 weeks before Christmas. Bring your brother, sister, or little friends to visit him. Yoo-hoo, see you soon, and in the meantime, a great big Merry Christmas from Penny's. P.S. By the way, we have some swell things that will make great gifts for mother and father."
At least they waited till the end of it to do their plug, right?
Exactly. But I love it. I love it, because one of the areas that I actively collect is 1930s Disney Christmas stuff. So I have corporate Christmas cards. I have gum stickers. I have gift tags. I have wrapping paper. I've got the Noma lights. I have,
Wow.
yeah, I've got Santa Claus premiums. So there were Mickey Mouse themed items that Santa Claus would give away. You would come visit Santa Claus, and then he would give you a little Mickey Mouse premium. Yeah, I've got about probably 50 or 60 or 70 1930s Disney Christmas items. And that's an example of another rare item. It's, to me, it's one of a kind, because in all my years, that's the only example I've ever seen.
So tell me about pennies then. Is that the JC pennies that we know here?
I think so.
I think
States?
so. So this was before they added the JC to it?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Interesting. I've never heard it as pennies before.
Yeah. They became a licensee in 32, I think it was 1932, and their big thing was back to school promotions. So buy your pencil box and your pencils and your Mickey Mouse themed clothing and your pencil crayons and scissors and all that sort of stuff.
Interesting.
Because this might, oh, there we go.
There it is.
Oh, wow.
So Mickey Mouse is holding an ice cream cup in his hand.
Yes.
And so this is a decal or decal, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And it was a promotion for Southern Dairies.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
So this decal, this was not sold to the public. This was actually for advertising. So this would have gone to sponsors and to the company, correct?
Yes, that is what I believe. They would have they would have put it on their the window of their storefront or their door or whatever. But yeah.
So it's mass produced, but not that massively, because it wasn't for the general public.
Wasn't for general consumption, and if they were applied to the window, how many of them survived? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You tear down the building and the window gets smashed in all likelihood.
Exactly. So that is a rare piece that you've got there.
It's another rare item from the collection.
Yeah.
You had touched on you and Jeff Curdy, being really good friends. Did you work in collaboration with Jeff as far as his book? Did he go to you as far as the cards, the Christmas cards, things like that?
So I've helped Jeff with two of his books. One is I think it's called Walt's Travels or Walt Disney Travels, where it's basically a photographic compendium of all these places that Walt visited over his lifetime, where he lived and countries that he visited. And so I facilitated a couple of pictures in that book when Walt was in France at the end of World War I. I had 5 photographs that Walt had taken when he was in France of Walt, 16-year-old, or actually turned 17 when he was there, but 17-year-old Walt Disney sitting on an abandoned Mark IV British tank at the Hindenburg Line. Another one where the famous story is Walt used to gather up souvenirs with a guy called the Georgia Cracker, and they would doctor these German helmets and paint a camouflage design on them so that they looked like sniper helmets. And then there was troop trains that were coming through Neufchâteau, and they would do a changeover in the train in that town. And so while the men were there, they would go aboard the train, Walt and the Georgia Cracker, with all these souvenirs. And they only ever had one sniper's helmet, and they used to get big bucks for it. So somewhere out there in the collecting world, there is a German sniper helmet, probably several, that was hand painted by Walt Disney. And it's not a real sniper helmet, it's a fake, but there's got to be a few out there. But one of the pictures is Walt Disney in this big field, and he's picking up this massive, massive artillery shell that's unexploded. And he's got it picked up, and he's got a big smile on his face. And then on the back, he wrote, looking for souvenirs. He hand wrote that on the back, right? Because that's what they would do. The Georgia Cracker and him would go out into the countryside in their spare time, and they would look for rifles and helmets and gear. And so there Walt is picking up this unexploded end of an artillery shell, and he's written on the back, looking for souvenirs, and he's got this big, huge grin on his face. It's like, what? What are you doing, buddy? Unexploded ordnance. Stay away.
Well, here's a little irony to that. So I was in Paris working on Euro Disneyland Paris, right, as an Imagineer. And one day we had to go home early. We were just told, everyone, you're stopping work and you're going home. And we were thinking, well, what's that all about? Well, we found out the next day, as they were bringing in loads of dirt, an unexploded shell from World War II had come in with this load of dirt. So they evacuated us all so they could take care of us properly. So there you go. In Paris Park,
Yeah.
Another shell, unexploded shell comes in.
Yeah, but I just giggled when I saw that photo. I thought, because Walt's got this big, grin on his face as he's picking this thing up. And then there was another photo of him with it was a guy in a French army uniform, and then he had his arm around a girl, and then there was Walt standing beside them, and he wrote that she was a prostitute, that she was a prostitute. Yeah. And then there was another picture of Walt, and I don't know who the young lady is, but there's a very well-dressed young lady, and it was when he was down in the French Riviera, just before that they were sent home. They were down in Marseille, and there's a beautiful marble building in the background, and he's dressed up in his Red Cross uniform with his sergeant stripes on, and he's got a walking or a swagger stick in his hand. He's got his arm around this young lady, and he says, on the French Riviera is what he wrote on the back of that one. But really neat stuff. Really neat stuff. Wow. Here's because it's we're in planting season right now.
Oh, green thumb
contest
for all young
Victory Gardens. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So I have three different versions of this. I have two for children and one for adults. And basically, Victory Gardens, World War II, people were encouraged to grow their own fruits and vegetables. Absolutely. And so they had a contest when interest in the program began to wane. They decided to have a contest. So the best garden or the best produce at the local level went to the state level, and then from the state level you went to the national level. And I believe the award was a $1,000 war bond was the grand prize. And this was the record book that you would keep track of your crops, how much you planted, the yield, the size, all that sort of stuff. So, and that artwork was done by Hank Porter as well. Hank Porter did so much for the company, especially during the war years. But you'll get to read about it maybe next year in my book.
There you go. There you go. So your new book is coming out next year. That's
what I'm hoping. Yeah, I'm in the final draft of the second draft of it right now. It's already been to the editors once, and now it's undergoing a second copy of it. So this is the first Mickey Mouse book from 1930.
Oh.
And it was published by a company called Bibbo and Lang, who also did sheet music. So the sheet music has this scene on it, and it's the wedding of Mr. and Mrs. Mickey Mouse, I think is the name of the sheet music. But on the sheet music, they added a bridal veil to the illustration for Minnie. But this is the first Mickey Mouse book, and it was written by the publisher's 11-year-old daughter, and it has a game in it. It underwent a couple of revisions because there's one part where Mickey gets a gun and he kills a cat or something that's going after Minnie, has got some love affection for Minnie. So they had to change that out of the lyrics for the second, third, and fourth printings. But there's about 100,000 copies of that were published. It's really hard to find it with the game. There's a game that was in the middle where you would cut out the pieces and a little game board. A lot of them are missing that. I know it's page 10 and 11 and 12 or whatever. But yeah, so that's the first Mickey Mouse book. So that was a holy grail item of mine for the longest time. But,
I was going to say, you don't see those very often. You don't see those. You really, really don't.
Yeah, they do come up, but it's...
And what is this?
Oh, my God. Yep.
So that is the original watercolor artwork for a fast fleet refueler that served in the South Pacific called the USS Escambia. Or Escambia, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Escambia. So you'll see the letter E on the globe on top of the gas pump. That was because the name of the ship was Escambia. It started with the letter E. So this is a watercolor, and so like I said, I've got 22 or 24 pieces of insignia artwork in my collection. I've got 3 watercolors, and then the rest are pencil drawings. But that was done for a fast fleet refueler that served in the South Pacific. So it carried bunker oil for the aircraft carriers, and it carried high octane fuel for the fighter planes and torpedo planes that were aboard the aircraft carriers. So they were basically a floating time bomb. If they got hit, they would all disintegrate. And so I became friends with that veteran because I'm doing my searches online for Disney insignia, and I come across this. They had a page and everything. So I contacted the guy and I said, "Hey, could you tell me how did you get the insignia?" And then we became friends. His name was Virgil Greer. And I said, tell me about your history. What was it like growing up in the Great Depression? What was your war record like? What did you do after the war? All that sort of stuff. And really, really interesting guy. His boat left San Francisco. He got married with his wife June in San Francisco, and before they went out, she bought him an American pottery Jose Carioca, which he took with him, and we just became really good friends, and we corresponded quite a bit. And then I got an email from his daughter one day and said, "Oh, I just want to let you know my dad's passed away." And I go, "What?"
Oh,
I just talked to him like a month prior or whatever it was, and she goes, "Yeah, he was diagnosed with throat cancer, and died two weeks after his diagnosis."
Wow.
And I said, "Oh my gosh," I said, "my condolences and sympathies. That's just horrible. I really enjoyed my time with him, speaking with him. I can give you a copy of the interview that I did with him if you want a copy of it, so you've got that remembrance of him as well." And she said, "Yeah." She goes, "But I wanted to let you know, my dad wanted me to give you the artwork."
Oh.
And I said, "What?" And she goes, "Yeah." And
wow. Good caretaker.
Yeah.
So she said, "Yeah, he really thought highly of you, and he thought that you would look after it, and so he wanted you to have it." And so I got a package a couple of weeks later, and it was the artwork, and then it was the American pottery Jose Carioca. And there's a funny story associated with that. He said his boat was in a typhoon, and things were flying all over his desk, and Jose fell off, and his foot broke off.
Oh
and
no!
So you can see where he's glued the foot on with rubber cement. Like there's a huge blob of rubber cement on Jose's foot. And then he always joked. He said, "Yeah, I always thought that Jose should have gotten a Purple Heart for this because he was wounded in the line of duty." But he sent me that, and the other really neat thing that he sent me was, and this was before he passed away. He was trained at the Hutchinson Naval Reserve Aviation Base in Hutchinson, Kansas. And they had a Disney insignia done for them. And it was Jiminy Cricket flying an airplane, and trailing behind the airplane was an anchor because it was a naval aviation base. And the first time that they had used that insignia was on the December 1943 or December 1944 issue of the base newsletter. So he sent me a copy of the base newsletter, which he was the editor of. And there's a big, huge image of Jiminy Cricket flying his airplane surrounded by a Christmas wreath on the front cover.
Oh. So that's fun.
Yeah.
That's
See,
fun.
that's cool.
Anyhow.
The one thing I wanted to touch on really quick, we're going to have you back for a second podcast because, there's so much I want to talk to you about. Sure. But you became friends with Ernest Napper and Susan.
Yes.
And
yes.
They are just two of the dearest people to me. I love them to death. And, I'm hoping sometime you would be able to come down here and go to the barn to meet them because
I would love
there's
to.
nobody like Ernie. Ernie has a love like I've never seen. And,
yes.
You guys, do you guys still talk? Do you guys manage to communicate with each other at all?
She leaves comments on my Facebook things and that we communicate that way. But she sent me a wonderful picture of Ernie in his dress blues. That's just a fantastic picture. They bought both of my books. They've just been enthusiastic supporters of mine for several years now. I really wanted to try to get down to Disneyland when he was still doing the flag retreat ceremony. I would have loved to have seen that in person and give him a big hug and a hearty handshake for a job well done. He's a very, very patriotic fellow, and he took his job at Disney very, very seriously and very respectful. Just a super guy. He does so much on the side. And then Susan as well. They're two, I consider them dear friends, and I would love to meet them. And I'm hoping maybe one day through this other project that I might be involved with, there's a chance that I'm going to be able to get down to that part of the country, so we'll see if I can, if it pans out like I hope it does, then I plan to spend one day, try to get there when the barn is open, because I've never seen the barn. I'd love to go to the barn and
you need to.
Hang out there for half a day or whatever, and meet you guys and
absolutely.
All my other friends down there that I don't get to see enough of.
Yeah.
Come on.
But as many times as you want to come on, I could regale you with stories about a million different things and a million different pieces. Well, not a million, but 600 artifacts anyhow. Stories.
I was gonna say we didn't touch on nearly as much. An hour flew by like nothing. But you guys, he is on the History Channel with How Disney Built America. You got to check that out. You got to check out his books, and again, his page, Vintage Disney Collectibles. He's incredible. David, thank
thank
you so
you.
much for your time today. I'm so grateful you had time to show up today.
Yeah, thank you to the both of you. And whenever you want me back, I'm more than overjoyed to be part of this. So invite me back as much as you want, and I'll always show up.
Excellent.
Okay.
Hey, I just wanted to mention though, we were talking about the sensitivity of a lot of these images and such for the time period, that Disney is sensitive with sharing that with the public and such. But I did want to say, so my dad was in World War II, and then he was recalled for Korea. So he was actually in 2 wars. But talking about my dad's perspective on all of this was the governments, that were at war, and it wasn't against the people themselves. And my dad had a healthy, as a soldier, he had a healthy perspective on a lot of this. And I was being very sensitive to things when I was working on Tokyo Disney land for Toontown. And I had a gentleman that was very much into Westerns and such. And my dad had been a child actor in a lot of those old Westerns. So he got excited and says, well, are your folks coming over for a visit? And I said, actually, they are. And I said, would you like to meet them? And maybe he can bring some of his movies to share with you. And so he was all excited and asked, has your dad ever been to Japan? And I thought, oh gosh, this is God, get me out of this one, please. And so I had said, yes, he has been over here before. And I tried to change the subject, but he went back. Anyways, he was a young man. And so he was not in the military, but he had said how much they appreciated the GIs coming over and giving them clothing and food and such. So he had a healthy perspective too. But I have to tell you something. So when my parents came over for a visit, this gentleman who was older than myself set up to take them around Tokyo and to show them around Tokyo. And it almost brought tears to my eyes. I was behind them, and here was my dad with this Japanese national with their arms around each other, looking around and talking about the different buildings, the ones that were there, the ones that weren't, and sharing little bits of stories and such. And it was, it's emotional. it was, but it's a perspective that you have to look at. And because my dad was even doing artwork that today would be seen as being questionable. In the end, my dad had the right attitude to everything, and we grew up with Japanese American friends that we didn't even think about that stuff. The past, the past was the past.
And like you said, it's governments. It's not necessarily people. It's governments, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. My dad did make a funny little statement. He said, the only thing I think I would have a hard time doing is, he says, buying a Mitsubishi car. Because he says those planes were shooting at me.
Yeah.
Those years back. But he was
the Mitsubishi Zero. Yeah, the Mitsubishi Zero, one of the best fighter planes developed during the war.
Yes. But he did own a Japanese car a couple of times. So there you go. It wasn't a Mitsubishi.
That's funny. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that puts it all in perspective, right? It's how you approach things and look at things, right?
Yes.
It's history. It's history.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure.
I wanted to throw that out. And also the other thing that's interesting, my dad was born in Vancouver, Canada.
Yes, I knew that, actually.
Yes.
I knew that. Yeah, I was born in South Vancouver. I lived in South Vancouver for 25 years, and then my wife and I bought a property a little bit to the east in a suburb just because it was affordable. But yeah, I grew up in South Vancouver. I lived there for 25 years. Loved it. It was a great city. Yeah.
Well, my dad was only 4 when they moved to Seattle.
Oh, okay.
So
another great
too
city.
Many memories with Vancouver, but
love Seattle. I got lots of friends down in Seattle. One of my friends that has one of the biggest collections in the world. He's probably top couple anyhow, artwork and three-dimensional and paper and stuff like that. He lives down in Seattle. He's been collecting since he was a kid. He has his original Donald Duck camera from 1947 when he was a kid, with the box with undeveloped film in it. I said, you need to get that film developed. He's the original
owner.
Yeah, and he's the original owner.
Yeah. That makes it even more valuable.
Yeah. His collection is amazing, but we'll save that for another day.
Anyway. Okay.
Yeah.
But,
all right, guys. Well,
thank you, gentlemen.
I appreciate
Had a blast.
Thank you, David.
Had a blast.
Had a blast for everybody. We will see you again soon. Thank you, guys. David, appreciate your time. Maddie, we will talk again soon. Take care, everybody. Have a amazing Sunday, and
have a great day,
we've got
everyone.
some surprises coming up. Bye bye. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.